Hello and welcome to Resource PNG. In this edition, we will see how business has been between PNG and Cairns since the resource boom started. We will also have a talk about tax practice in PNG and speak with the chairman of Gaydon's Lawyers, Mr. Ian Clark, about how he sees PNG's performance so far in relation to the mining and petroleum sector. First up, we have the governor of the Bank of Papua New Guinea, Mr. Loy Bukani. He had to talk to us about how we should approach this resource boom so that we can see the benefits filtered down into our local communities. Welcome, viewers. Tonight we speak to the governor of the Bank of Papua New Guinea, Mr. Loy Bukani. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
So let's have a talk about the benefits of the LNG project. How can we have the benefits from it filtered down to the rest of Papua New Guinea?
Thank you. This question is a big question, a very challenging one for both government policymakers. For the government, it's not only now that we're talking about the LNG and deriving the benefits or spreading the benefits of what comes out of the LNG to the rest of Papua New Guinea. Government has been receiving a lot of resources, revenue in the past from the past other projects. And the question of how it effectively and equally distribute that benefits of of those projects down to the rest of Papua New Guinea has been a notable one. It has not been effective. So the challenge now is how do they improve on it when the LNG resources or tax money from the LNG comes in. That's due to come in around 2014 when the export of the LNG commences. It is going to be a challenge. The rest of Papua New Guinea requires infrastructures, roads, hospitals, and all those kind of things. So I think very basic thing is that Papua New Guinea government should be looking at improving those, getting the money from the resource sector and making sure people in the rural areas have access to roads, schools, hospitals or clinics. And that's the very basic fundamental role of government. In the area of, once those infrastructures are in place, people can then take up the opportunities of creating business, empowering themselves to create wealth for themselves. So, and then they can realize some of the benefits coming down from those major resources like the LNG project.
We are talking with the governor of the Bank of PNG, Mr. Loy Bukani, on how he sees the resource sector affecting PNG's growth. More on that when we return. Good to have your company. With the PNG LNG project, experts have predicted that the kina will become stronger against other currencies. That is why the Sovereign Wealth Fund was created. Here is the governor of the Bank of PNG, Mr. Loy Bukani, who explains how it all works. With the LNG project, there's also that concept that once this starts, that will make the PNG kina become a lot stronger. Are you able to tell us what that would do?
Yes, we have experienced that since construction of the LNG project commenced, where we saw the kina appreciating, meaning getting stronger mainly against the US dollar and other currencies, but not really against the Australian dollar. Now, against the US dollar, we see a lot of foreign exchange coming in, and much of that is to pay for contractors, for materials, domestic materials, and in fact also pay workers here in Papua New Guinea. So both the project principal, which is ExxonMobil, and also there's major contractors and the subcontractors that have been sourced from overseas and now operating in Papua New Guinea, they have been bringing in a lot of foreign exchange. That's number one. Number two is that because of the high commodity price that we had, in terms of the exporters have been bringing a lot of foreign exchange into Papua New Guinea. So that has been the major cause of the appreciation of the kina. Kina has been very strong. On one hand, it's good in terms of like inflation, bringing down inflation, because it should make those imported things that we import from overseas, they become cheaper. We see in the shops prices have not, especially prices of those imported items have not gone down, so that depends on other things also. Okay. The wholesalers, retailers in Papua New Guinea, if they are importing everything and without any local cost here like transportation, or which we know are very high, then the cheaper prices that of those goods that they buy overseas do not translate into prices on the shelf. So they will keep the prices still high because of the high local cost. So that's on one hand, it should reduce prices in Papua New Guinea. On the other hand, for those exporters that are exporting and bringing in foreign exchange coming in, it will adversely affect them, because in kina terms, they will get less kina now in terms of those export receipts. So that is to some extent been, that effect has been offset by the high prices. But to date, because we are communicating with the export sector all the time, and the exporters are now telling us, look, I think the kina's strengthening is affecting us already. So that's why recently, we've been very actively managing the kina, or supporting the kina to make it very stable. So it's been very stable for a few months now. We don't want it to appreciate too fast, too soon, because then it will adversely affect those exporters in a big way. So we're managing it, allowing it to move gradually, either up or down. But the concerns are we're very much looking at how it affects the real sector, which is the exporters on the side, the importers, and all that. And of course, tourists and the people traveling, because the exchange rate is a very effective tool that affects the level of both in kina terms and foreign exchange if they are moving out of Papua New Guinea.
So it seems that if the kina rate changes, then you'd actually see it in our shops, but in turn it will actually affect our agricultural economy, especially if they're exporting things overseas. They've created the Sovereign Wealth Fund, or that concept of the Sovereign Wealth Fund has come into play to actually help to assist with the kina appreciation of the kina value. How does that work? Because in layman's terms, we're trying to figure out where exactly is the Sovereign Wealth Fund? What does it look like? To the average person, how do we explain that?
Thank you. It's the Sovereign Wealth Fund, just to give an update where it is now. The committee that has been tasked by the government to work on it, we are putting together an implementation team that comprises both ourselves from the bank, Treasury, Planning, Justice, and Attorney General. So there is a team now been put together to really work on implementation of the building up that fund. It's just like it'll be an entity, but it has a role that when those monies coming from both dividends and tax from the LNG, they go into this fund, and from there, as and when it's required by government to be drawn down, it goes into the budget and then come to fund certain things. So in a way, what I've just explained is that since the construction, in terms of the effect on the exchange rate, will be minimal, or will be cushion off, because those monies, rather than coming straight into Papua New Guinea, will go into this fund, which will be invested offshore, which will be put into other banks or entities offshore. So they don't have a big impact, because the magnitude of the money that we're talking about is huge. So if this money comes in at one time, you can imagine the kina will go very strong, will appreciate very fast. So that is why one role of the Sovereign Wealth Fund is to leave the money offshore, so it doesn't affect the kina. And then as and when the government needs it to fund certain projects here in Papua New Guinea, then it goes down it's drawn down through the budget. So that's how it will minimize the impact on the exchange rate.
So in general, despite the LNG project, the resource sector has had an impact on the economy. As the governor for the Bank of PNG, how would you explain that?
Yes, the resource sector has been the major driver for the economic growth that we've seen in Papua New Guinea. Coupled with that, we have also high commodity prices that bring in needed foreign exchange for our exporters. The exporters then create businesses or expand their businesses, and also coming back to the resource sector, mainly the LNG project, the impact it had on Papua New Guinea is quite widespread, and not only in Port Moresby or it's going to Lae, where they are supplying machines to those companies operating up in the highlands, and around in the highlands area, all the way down to where the pipeline is going to come. So there is a widespread of benefits already taking place in Papua New Guinea. The added to that is that also private companies in Papua New Guinea have also built up the capacities since they learned about the go ahead of the LNG project back in 2009 and 10. So they are also not like they're putting a lot of reinvesting in their companies again to build up the capacity to be able to take opportunities that arise out of the LNG project or other resource projects. And looking ahead, I think in this, we hear a lot of projects coming on stream now, and including in the LNG, if the Interoil one comes in and the Talisman comes in, what I'm saying is that it can sustain the level of growth in Papua New Guinea, because we don't want a situation where after the LNG project, then the that's the projection we have at the moment. The economic growth sort of levels off or goes down. But if you have the Interoil and the Talisman LNG projects come on stream, the people, the machines that come out of the PNG LNG project can be also taken up, absorbed into those new projects. So growth can continue to be either sustained at the same level or even increase.
That was Mr. Bakani with an explanation on how the Sovereign Wealth Fund works. After the break, we shall talk about the Dutch disease. With all the wealth that is coming into the country, there is a fear of what economists term the Dutch disease. Here is Mr. Loy Bakani, who will explain a bit more about that term. So this, with what's happening with the resource sector, there's that fear of something called the Dutch disease. How can we actually help the non-mining sector to basically brace for this or prevent this from happening?
That's the another role of the Sovereign Wealth Fund. The Dutch disease mainly is coming from if the kina or the local currency appreciates or becomes very strong. And as I explained earlier, that if it's not offset by high commodity price or price for those commodities, then you will have the incomes for those sectors or non-mining and gas sector being affected or declining. So it will result in the incomes going low, and then they will if they're not able to sustain themselves, they'll die away. So we have a small export sector. So it's very important that we cushion it or try to avoid any adverse impact coming out from the LNG project. That is why one of the role of the Sovereign Wealth Fund is that the funds stays offshore and brought in. They bring them in as and when they need it, slowly or gradually, but so it avoids the affecting the exchange rate in a big way, appreciating it or making it stronger. So that's one effect of it. The others is that when they all can be defined as part of or effect of Dutch disease, is where we've seen in the past when the construction of the LNG project started. People, resources were starting to move out from the agriculture and even public service, in the public sector also. People are moving out into the LNG project. So in a way, it luckily did not cripple those non-LNG sector, but that's one effect of it. You don't only see it in through the appreciation of the kina, but it weakens those other sectors. Like when you get a good qualified people moving to the LNG project, that's how it can adversely affect those sectors that rely a lot also on those very qualified, but they don't have the resources to hold back those people, so that the people go for the greener pastures in the LNG project.
So it seems it affects the workforce as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So now that we're talking about development, that would mean that they'd have development in rural areas. So how would you, as the governor of the Bank of PNG, how can you assist people by expanding the financial services to other parts of Papua New Guinea, not only use the capital?
Coming back to the LNG project again, when I said if the government can or will use the money properly for certain projects, mainly to do with the infrastructure, building up capacity in the SOEs, state-owned enterprise, and all that. In that way, it's spreading the benefits of the from the LNG project, or the money that is coming out from the LNG project to the rest of the economy. In the area of banking or financial services generally, without the reform or the advancement of technology, telecommunications in Papua New Guinea, we would still need roads and good infrastructure. But now with the introduction or the advancement in telecommunications, the services that we provide, especially in banking, it's a kind of a leapfrog over all the constraints that Papua New Guinea has. So telecommunications with the use of mobile phones and wireless and all that are now advancing in terms of providing financial services to our rural people. That's what we are promoting. The Bank of Papua New Guinea is taking a lead in that, in terms of overall what you call financial inclusion. Financial inclusion is basically, just to get everybody in the population be financially included. Meaning, and one indicator of that is to have a bank account, or at least to have access to be able to send money or receive money on the mobile phone. So that's through mobile phone device. So that's already accessing financial services. Previously, as opposed to previously where you don't have, you're not able to receive money from your relatives or friends over the mobile phone. Now you are able to, especially when you are right down in the village, in the rural areas. So that's one area through the mobile phone. Microfinance is one. We're promoting microfinance in both lending and also the institutions like microbanks. We have 3 so far, with this potential for another 3 or 4 coming up, and we are assessing those applications. So that's, and of course, comes together with it is financial literacy. Now we're getting a lot of money now through the LNG project, but our people lack financial literacy. Financial education is very much lacking. So in our process of trying to expand financial services, we also want to include financial literacy in those in those events. Really for the future generation, we working with Department of Education to have financial education in school curriculum, both in primary and secondary. So it's exciting. It's an exciting time for Papua New Guinea, and I think I'm very comfortable that in the financial services area, we are moving ahead very fast because of the event of or the changes that we're seeing in telecommunications.
So, is there anything else you'd like to talk about with regards to the work of Bank of Papua New Guinea?
I think it's one warning that I'm continuing to put out some public notices. People take advantage of this, and not all, but some people take advantage of this technology or new technologies that are emerging now, or changes in telecommunication, and I do it to try and con people into all those kind of things. So to believing that you like mobile phones, you get messages saying you won a lottery or you won those, but those kind of things are bad. they disrupt people by conning them to waste money, and even in with the emails and Facebook and all those kind of things. I mean, they are good things in terms of advancing business and all that, but I think there are certain people who try to do different things and disrupt the advancement of those. So my appeal is to people, listeners, or the public, to be aware of those kind of con things going around. There is a recent one that they put the Bank of Papua New Guinea logo and put my photograph at the bottom. So, but the email addresses, everything is all wrong. So it's been circulating in emails, and that's why prompted me to put out some public notices. And so we will continue to fight that. If only we know of the perpetrators, then we will take appropriate action by taking them to courts or police. I think that's my warning to the public.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bakani, for giving us an in-depth explanation on the Sovereign Wealth Fund.
My pleasure.
Don't go away. After the break, we have a chat with the Vice President of the Cairns Chamber of Commerce to see how business has been since the resource boom started. That and more when we return. Cairns is less than 2 hours away by plane, and they are very much interested in business here in PNG. We spoke with the Vice President of the Cairns Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Gary Allwood, about how they see business since the resource boom started. Good evening.
Good evening.
So please tell us, how's the relationship between the Cairns Chamber of Commerce and business, in terms of business with PNG?
Well, I guess we've had a long history geographically of being very close in business, and certainly over the last, say, 25 years or so, there's been very active fly-in, fly-out arrangements, supply services from this region to Papua New Guinea, and good trade. So yeah, it's been a long history.
So how's the association with the Cairns Chamber of Commerce and the Port Moresby Chamber of Commerce?
Well, we've got a very active arrangement. We've had various trade missions over the years, and we have a good dialogue between not only Cairns Chamber and Port Moresby, but also Lae Chamber of Commerce.
So there's this FIFO activity, fly-in, fly-out activity, and also shipping services. Yep. How does that work?
Well, the shipping services, we've got operations out of the Cairns port to various locations. We also ship a lot of goods and services through Townsville, south of here. So from a shipping point of view, there's flexibility out of this region into Papua New Guinea and the region.
Okay. And this trade link that you speak of between Cairns, Port Moresby and Lae, how does that work?
Well, it was an initiative started around about 6-7 months ago, where a lot of Cairns businesses that are very active in the PNG corporate market, and PNG businesses that are active in the Cairns region, felt that they wanted to develop a better networking arrangement. So the catalyst really was the Cairns Chamber of Commerce, Port Moresby and Lae database of members, but it's developed very much into free enterprise, private businesses that are active, to the point where it's really contact personal relationships, developing those further. Obviously things are very active within PNG at the moment, and there's opportunities for different businesses to engage. And you've got a lot of global companies operating in PNG as well that are looking for services, and we need to make sure that they're also looking at places like Cairns as a potential as a supply hub.
Just off the top of your head, how much money is exchanged between these centres?
Well, that's a good question. I think it's certainly in the multi-millions of dollars in terms of normal trade and business each year. But we've got quite a diverse economy here. Obviously agriculture is one, the service sector in terms of aviation skills training, which a lot of Papua New Guinean people come down and train, so that's a very active. We've got the International Marine Centre here that's very significant, so the marine sector is getting a lot of training. So our training side in this region is very active through TAFE, etc. Very much the train the trainer type model, as training is very key to growth and development, so we're very keen to work in partnership with Papua New Guinea. And obviously the service sector with things like fly in, fly out, freight, the regular services. It's an hour and a quarter up the road from here, so it's a very close commercial centre for us.
Just a thing, I went walk in Cairns. You have a very vibrant agricultural services or agricultural community. How do you think you can assist Port Moresby or Lae in that sense?
In the agricultural area? Well, I think there's probably an untapped opportunity. Many years ago we used to supply a lot of milk, for instance, into Papua New Guinea, and that apparently no longer is the case. There's fresh fruit and vegetables in the region, and certainly even further south. I think there's a great opportunity to assist in that sort of area. So we'd like to see more activity in the agriculture area between Papua New Guinea and Australia in terms of a mutual commercial benefit.
Also, I think your Cairns Airport's getting an extension.
Yep, well, Cairns Airport, being a 24-hour operation, is one of the biggest ones in Australia. And through freight services, through passenger services, a lot of mining groups have regular services to their various mines activity. That's continuing to grow and develop, and I guess just even commerce, that you can literally fly from Cairns, spend eight hours on the ground in Port Moresby and fly back, allows commercial activities both ways, and that's really good. It's been developing very well.
Anything else you'd like to talk about?
Well, I just think that there's so much activity going on now in Papua New Guinea, has been for some time. The future is very bright. I think we're very good friends, and we'd like to see that we develop a good working relationship going forward, and there's opportunities both from Papua New Guinea side as well as Cairns, so it's a good working relationship.
So what would be the Cairns Chamber of Commerce take on the resource sector in PNG?
Well, it's extremely active, and we're in engagement with many of the resource companies globally and in Australia in terms of encouragement for them to base some of their services in Cairns in terms of the opportunities we provide, but also supporting their operations in Papua New Guinea, because geographically we're well placed to assist. So we're very active, very conscious of the sorts of developments that have taken place, but we're also very conscious about what's coming down the pipeline, which is very exciting. I mean, from my own personal view, I've been to Papua New Guinea many times since back in 1975 and have a number of clients that we service. And so besides flying over most of Papua New Guinea, working in various areas, it's an extremely exciting area. And I'll give another example. Tourism is one area that the Chamber is very conscious about as well. Cairns has got a very active mature tourism market, but Papua New Guinea has an exciting tourism market as well. And what we're trying to do is encourage how we can assist growing Papua New Guinea's tourism market. And we give an example where people may come for a dive experience from North America or Europe. Why not come not only to Cairns for the Barrier Reef, which is iconic, but also go to Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands. The whole region here has an exciting tourism potential, and I think we can see opportunities of working together in a global village to help each other. So that's just one example.
So you say you visited Papua New Guinea. Where exactly did you visit?
Well, besides Port Moresby, Lae, Madang, Mount Hagen, Porgera Gold Mine, I've driven the Highlands Highway. Yeah, there's lots of places, and many times, and got a number of people there that are friends and acquaintances that we deal with regularly. So yeah, Papua New Guinea is a fond place. Go there quite regularly for businesses, and yeah, I love going there.
Thank you, Mr. Allwood, for coming on our show.
You're welcome.
That was the Vice President of the Cairns Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Gary Allwood. After the break, we will talk about taxes and tax practice in PNG. Taxes. This is a word that most people do not like seeing in their payslips, and yet this is a must in PNG. PwC had a talk to us about tax practice in the country. Here is PwC's tax services partner, Mr. David Caritas. Good evening.
Good evening. Nice to be here.
So, how long have you been in Papua New Guinea?
I've been here in PNG for just over 25 years. I came here in 1987 as a tax manager, and I've been in charge of the tax practice at PwC for the last just over 10 years.
All right. So give us some of the positive things about the fiscal regime in the tech sector.
Well, in the resource sector, there are a number of positives for investors in mining, petroleum and gas projects. For example, in the mining sector, there is a potential double deduction for expenditure incurred on exploration for minerals in Papua New Guinea. In the gas and oil sectors, the tax rate is capped at 30% for oil and gas projects, and there's no dividend withholding tax on dividends paid from income from gas operations or income from petroleum operations. A further incentive is that obviously for such large-scale projects, they need to borrow significant amounts of money from outside PNG. The interest that's paid on that borrowing is not subject to interest withholding tax. So that makes PNG's fiscal regime for resource projects quite competitive on a global scale.
So what are the main industries that your tax practice covers?
Well, because PNG is a small place, our tax practice, whilst we have a strong client base in the resource sector, we also have a significant client base in some of the other sectors. But we do certainly have a strong expertise in advising on resource projects, right from the exploration stage through the development and to production. But at the same time, we have in our client base, we are advisors to three large banks that operate in PNG, as well as a number of financial institutions. So we have a strong presence in the financial services sector as well as into the resources sector. In addition, we have in our client base a number of companies that operate in multiple businesses, which might include motor vehicle dealerships, transport, hotels and shipping. So a very broad cross-section, and we're fortunate enough to have over 30 people working in our tax practice, and two of our senior staff are qualified Papua New Guineans who are helping us. In fact, sorry, that's three. So one of our staff is a director, and we have two managers from PNG, as well as about 20 others in our staff who are Papua New Guineans, and probably 7 or 8 expatriate employees as part of the tax practice.
So what would be your advice to returning or potential investors coming to Papua New Guinea?
Oh, well, our advice would be that it's important that you comply with local law, particularly the Companies Act and the Investment Promotion Act when you're setting up your operations in PNG, to ensure that you're ticking all the boxes on the compliance side, to ensure that you have your tax registrations so that you're able to operate immediately that your staff are in PNG. And obviously, to the extent that you need to bring in expertise from outside the country, there's a need to comply with the employment law in PNG and get work permits and employment visas for the expatriate staff that will be needed to come into PNG to do the projects and to train the people that will also be employed from the local population.
So is there anything else you'd like to talk about, Mr. Caritas?
Yes, one of the things that PwC have been doing for a number of years is submissions to government for changes in the tax law for each budget, and this year is no exception. We've already lodged a number of submissions dealing with such things as the introduction of a GST deferral scheme for imports, because the refunding of overpaid GST is a big issue in the management and resources used at the IRC, and we think that a deferral scheme which overcomes those things would be advantageous both to Customs and to the Internal Revenue Commission. There are a number of other items that we've made submissions on which are quite technical, but also ultimately will assist business. One of the impediments we see to business is the imposition of dividend withholding tax on domestic dividends, and we're hoping that the Treasury will see the benefits that we think could arise from only making dividend withholding tax apply when the dividends are being paid to the final shareholders rather than within company groups. In addition, there are some other things that we've been looking at, including superannuation contributions for self-employed. Under the current law, a person who is self-employed is unable to get access to the tax benefits that arise from saving money through superannuation. So there's quite a bit on the table, and we're hoping that we'll continue to have dialogue with Treasury now that the new government is formed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Caritas, for giving us information about tax practice in Papua New Guinea.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
Do stay with us. When we return, we have a talk to the immediate past president of the Australian PNG Business Council and the current chairman of Gaydon's Lawyers, Mr. Ian Clark. How can PNG take advantage of its current economic situation? The chairman of Gaydon's Lawyers, Mr. Ian Clark, gave us his insight on the matter. Mr. Clark is also the immediate past president of the Australian PNG Business Council. This was an interview I did with him earlier. So what are some of the challenges that the resource boom is going to bring to PNG?
I think a better way to look at it is the opportunities. We're in Cairns at the moment. We've been in Cairns at the second gas forum. And there are many projects now that are about to move to a new phase. You've got the PNG LNG Project, you've got the Interoil Project, and there's quite a few in the resource sector. And I think the real challenge now for PNG is to make sure that the social and the economic infrastructure is able to cope with what's going to be an enormous influx of people and goods. So economic infrastructure, I mean power, roads and ports, and much is being done in that regard. And of course social infrastructure, hospitals and health and education. And I think they're the issues that will face PNG shortly. And indeed, we've just had a general election, we're about to have a new government, and much work has been started in those areas by the previous O'Neill government. So I think now we're going to see a wave of not only resource development, but a lot of work with economic and social infrastructure required.
So do you think PNG is prepared for this, to absorb this resource boom?
I think in a macro sense, yes, it is. There's a lot of thoughts gone into this. The previous government passed the Sovereign Wealth Fund legislation, which of course is not yet enacted. So thought has gone into how PNG is going to absorb and manage these enormous financial changes. The Sovereign Wealth Fund will have a stabilisation fund and also a development fund. So a lot of thinking's been going into that. The previous government has also talked about combining with the private sector in PPPs, public-private partnership, where I think the PNG government is seeing that the private sector can shoulder arms and joint venture with the state to help it deliver some of these services. So a lot of thinking has gone into that. There's a strong independent central bank which has been in place now for some 12 years, a strong public and private sector superannuation. So the financial sector is good, the base legislation's good, so the framework is there, the challenges coming.
All right, just based on what you just talked about, in terms of financial literacy, I think this is a bit with relations to business development. I think that's something that's lacking in Papua New Guinea. As the immediate past president of the Australian PNG Business Council, what do you think we should be looking at in terms of trying to educate our people in terms of financial literacy?
Look, I think clearly education is very important. So education for all Papua New Guineans is a must. But Papua New Guineans are wonderful traders. I mean, there is a tremendous level of trade that goes on throughout the country already. I think what we've seen developments with microfinance, and we've seen a number of the banks rolling out electronic banking, which will start to spread financial literacy, and I think that will only increase. So that all will help. But education and opportunities is really what it's all about. So I think financial literacy is probably going to improve significantly as these projects come and as we get the electronic, email, mobile phones for all Papua New Guineans. Suddenly there's an opportunity to get and help increase financial literacy across the country.
So what are the changes that are occurring with the PNG Australian business relationship? What do you think you're seeing now?
Look, there's a significant change. I first came to PNG in 1980, and at that stage Australian development assistance or aid comprised a fairly significant part of the annual budget. Now it's quite small. I suspect it's only about a third. So the relationship has changed as it needed to, has matured, and I see it more as one of an economic partnership. And right now, the Australian and the PNG governments are renegotiating the Development Cooperation Treaty, which is the main treaty that sets out the aid budget each year. We believe in the private sector, and certainly the Business Council, that needs to be more of a joint venture agreement, an economic cooperation agreement. Australia can bring finance, PNG's got the projects, we should be doing it together. So there's a dramatic change in the relationship which is entirely appropriate. And I think the next Development Cooperation Treaty will look more like an economic cooperation joint venture, as it should.
So talking about the economic cooperation joint venture, just a question I'd like to ask you. Recently, the Asian Development Bank gave us stats about how the Australian and PNG businesses are doing. Apparently, there's a little bit of money going in from Australian into Papua New Guinea, but there's a lot coming out and it doesn't go back in. How can we actually keep that money within Papua New Guinea, in your opinion?
Well, it depends what the money. If the money's going out of the country but being invested for the benefit of Papua New Guineans, that's not necessarily a bad thing. As long as those funds are available to help build PNG's social and economic infrastructure, I'm not sure it's a bad thing. I think it's very important that PNG have a very strong taxation system. The amount of taxation revenue that should be collected through this forthcoming boom is considerable, and I think it's important that PNG is able to have the necessary institutional strengthening to ensure it captures and taxes those foreign investors, because I think at the end of the day, revenue collection probably is a very good source of government funding.
Right. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about?
There's one burning issue at the moment that business faces, and I think PNG faces too, is people movement. I firmly believe, and I know the business councils believe, that we must make it easier for our countrymen and women to travel between Australia and PNG. It's very important. We've heard at the conference about a lack of skills or skill shortage in PNG for these projects. And yes, there's a growth of tertiary educations, but I really believe we must be easier for Australians and Papua New Guineans to travel between each other's country. And that's a very complicated issue in Australia at the moment, but I think it's one that needs reform, considerable reform.
Thank you very much, Ian, for your time.
My pleasure.
That ends another edition of Resource PNG. Thank you for your company. If you have any queries about the program, do email it through to resourcepng@mtv.com.pg or check MTV online, that's www.mtv.com.pg, and go to our Resource PNG page. Until next time, have a pleasant week.